Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Carving It Up Live right here on YouTube Live, Facebook, and Twitter. I am Bryson Carver, as always, and it is great to be back on live. Obviously, last week just did podcast episodes, so nothing in the live arena with YouTube and Twitter and Facebook, but it's great to be back. Got a great show for you guys today. It's draft week. It's gonna be an insane show on Thursday with who's going to be the where all five quarterbacks going to go. We pretty much know the first two and where they're going to go with the first two picks. But I'm about to get into San Francisco in just a second. That's where the draft is really kind of kicks off, especially you got Atlanta at 4. What are they going to do? They already got a quarterback, so just a ton to break down right there. But I will discuss Mac Jones and Trey Lance. Apparently, the 49ers are down to those two guys. It's Mac Jones or it's Trey Lance. One of those two guys is going to San Francisco. I'll talk about that in just a second. Also, reports have surfaced that that the Falcons are going to trade Julio Jones and that teams are inquiring about trading for him. There's one team that I think would be the perfect fit for Julio Jones. I'll get into that later on in the show also. The Lakers look like a complete train wreck without LeBron James, even with Anthony Davis back, and I understand he's been out for a while, but they look like an absolute train wreck without LeBron. I'll talk about that later on the show. That is all coming up next. Also, what the Cowboys should do in the draft. But let's start with the San Francisco 49ers. And, man, there's a lot to break down with Kyle Shanahan, the head coach, with John Lynch, the general manager, obviously future Hall of Famer. And there's a lot going on there. First of all, Kyle Shanahan was actually asked today in a press conference about Jimmy Garoppolo. He said, what's the percentage chance, basically, that he's going to be back with the team this upcoming season? And his response was, I can't guarantee you we'll all be here on Sunday, meaning alive. Okay, way to put it bluntly, Coach. So it looks like the situation with Garoppolo and Shanahan is not exactly on stable grounds, if you will, and they're absolutely going to take a quarterback. We knew that when they were, I believe they had the 12th pick. And they traded with Miami to go all the way up to 3. We're like, okay, you're not trading up for 3 to get Kyle Pitts. You've already got George Kittle. You're not, trading up to take a left tackle, in Penei Sewell, who I think is going to be a superstar in the NFL. Well, you just signed Trent Williams, right? Like, you're not trading up to get, with all due respect, you're not trading up to get Jamar Chase or Devontae Smith with the 3rd overall pick. You're trading up to get a quarterback. And so apparently, I think we all know the first two quarterbacks off the board. Trevor Lawrence is going number 1 to Jacksonville, and Zach Wilson is going to go number 2 overall to the Jets. That's set in stone. Obviously, Trevor Lawrence is going number 1 overall. I'm 100% sure of that. I'm 98.92% sure that that the Jets are going to take Zach Wilson. The draft really starts at 3 with the 49ers, because then at that point, you've got 3 of the star quarterbacks in this draft available. You've got Trey Lance, kid who I think's honestly going to be the second best quarterback in the draft to Trevor Lawrence. I love Trey Lance. You got Justin Field, who for some reason has been heavily maligned over the last few months, even though, there's been no games played since January, and apparently he just got bad at football all of a sudden and is, apparently not a hard worker, which is BS, but that's neither here nor there. And then you got Mac Jones, who I've discussed in depth on this show. Well, apparently, according to reports, according to Ian Rappaport, NFL insider for the NFL Network, Justin Fields is off the 49ers board because he reported that they're down to 2 guys, Trey Lance or Mac Jones. They're down to those 2 guys, and according to multiple reports, which we actually talked about on the show about a month ago, that Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch were kind of at, going back and forth about which quarterback they should draft. Kyle Shanahan likes Mac Jones. John Lynch likes Trey Lance. So they're kind of going back and forth with that. And, I talked about Mac Jones on Thursday show. Didn't do a show on Friday. And I was just saying, with Mac Jones, if he goes to, say, a team like the San Francisco 49ers, as we have my man Barry Grant, what did I tell you? Mac Jones, baby. Hey, look, he's obviously teams like him. I don't know why. They liked Mitchell Trubisky too, which is who I compared Mac Jones to on the show on Thursday. If he goes to San Francisco, I think the 49ers are going to make the playoffs. They won't win the division. He's not beating out Russell Wilson. He's not beating out a stacked Rams team. Heck, I don't know if he could even beat out the Arizona Cardinals, which obviously the NFC West is the best division of football. But if Mac Jones goes to San Francisco with the 7-seed playoffs on both sides, as long as they stay healthy with that roster, they can get to the playoffs. Hey, they got to the Super Bowl with Jimmy Garoppolo. They can get to the playoffs with Mac Jones, just like the Bears with a stacked roster and an unbelievable defense and a great offensive head coach can get to the playoffs. Heck, they won the division with Mitchell Trubisky. And then we got to the playoffs against the defending Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles, and then it kind of came crashing down. And the defensive coordinators had an entire offseason to figure out Mitchell Trubisky, and he's not been the same. He's a backup quarterback now in Buffalo to Josh Allen. That's what Mac Jones is going to be. He's not trash, He's not trash. He had a great season last year at Alabama. He did. Now, people were comparing it to Joe Burrow's season, which I think is ridiculous. Joe Burrow had the greatest season in college football history by quarterback. I mean, like 60 touchdown passes, undefeated, Heisman. I mean, just the whole bit. He was unbelievable. I'm not saying Mac Jones can't play. I am saying franchise quarterback, guy, you're going to take top 3 and you trust that he's going to lead you to a Super Bowl. What do you see? My question to the 49ers is this. What do you see in Mac Jones that you don't see in Jimmy Garoppolo? Both are immobile. Garoppolo makes questionable decisions at best with the football. Here's the thing. Mac Jones has never had to make difficult decisions. You know why? He had this Devontae Smith guy who, won the Heisman Trophy. I can't remember what the Heisman's for. Oh, yeah, it's the best player in college football. He had that guy to throw to. He had Najee Harris in the backfield, who's going to be a first-round running back. He's got, obviously, Jalen Waddle before the injury. He's one of the fastest players in college football. He had Mickens, had a really good tight end. Obviously, had a stacked defense behind him. And by the way, the SEC was surprisingly kind of down last year. Alabama was great. Florida was really good, at least until they played Oklahoma. Georgia was a little disappointing, and then he had Auburn at a disappointing season. Texas A&M was great, but come on, they wouldn't have. They weren't in the same class as Alabama. But I mean, they weren't. A&M fans were complaining about not getting the playoff, and my response was, "Hey, it doesn't matter. You're going to get blown out by Alabama anyway. You did in week 2. Who am I to say that's going to change?" And so when you look at what quarterback out of Alabama has succeeded in the NFL, matter of fact, let me rephrase that. The best quarterback out of Alabama to succeed in the NFL is Joe Namath. Joe Namath won a Super Bowl with the New York Jets. We all remember him. He guaranteed the Super Bowl win against the Baltimore Colts at the time, not the Indianapolis Colts. They were the Baltimore Colts at the time in Super Bowl III. And the Jets upset them. I think the final score is like 16-7. And we all know the iconic image of Joe Namath holding the number 1 running off the field into the locker room. Joe Namath had a career-losing NFL record. He was under 500. That's the best Alabama quarterback. So who am I to think that this unathletic kid who can't move in the pocket, who has an average arm, who, by the way, didn't have a great pro day, in a league where you have to be mobile more than ever, who am I to say he's going to succeed in the league? Like Super Bowl succeed. Heck, Pro Bowl succeed. That's my point. Now we got a comment from Clutch Sports Talk, my man Ryan Flowers. He says Jones would benefit from being drafted by the 49ers. That's exactly what I said. He's going to that system with a great offensive coach in Kyle Shanahan, great defense behind him, great weapons. You got Deebo Samuel and you got George Kittle, and I love the kid Brandon Ayuk that they took last year out of Arizona State. I think he's going to be a really good player in the league. And so it's just like the Chicago Bears. Trubisky had weapons. Trubisky had the offensive line. Trubisky had the defense. The great offensive coach. Y'all stop hating on Matt Nagy. He's never had a star quarterback. And he's gotten to the playoffs twice. Man can coach. It's identical. So Matt can get you to the playoffs next year, but after that, forget about it. But when we get to Trey Lance. Trey Lance is a guy who the last time he played college football was 2019. Of course, he didn't opt out of last year. It was a canceled season or a postponed season for Division II college football. It was postponed to, it was basically spring football. And, of course, he didn't play. He's wanting to get ready for the draft, which is, of course, understandable. But Trey Lance is a guy who didn't throw a single interception at North Dakota State in 2019. He also ran for over 1,100 yards. Okay? His pocket feet need to improve. That's an area he needs to improve on. But he's got a good arm. He's accurate. He moves around, which, again, is perfect for the NFL. I truly believe Trey Lance is going to be the second best quarterback out of this draft. Because, look, for all the comments made by Trevor Lawrence in that Sports Illustrated piece, we don't have enough time to get into it. That was something. But with all that talent, he's not going to fail in the NFL. There's no way. There's no way. And so with that said, Trey Lance is going to be the second best quarterback in this draft. Okay? It needs to move better in the pocket, but as far as mobility, as far as being able to extend plays, this might be the best quarterback in the draft at that. Justin Fields, I don't know what happened with Justin Fields. I don't get it. The man comes back, obviously was not as good his junior year as he was his sophomore year at Ohio State. But all he did against Clemson in a Brent Venables-led defense, of course, Brent Venables is one of the best defensive coaches in college football. All Justin Fields did with a busted-up rib was throw 6 touchdowns. That's, no big deal. He threw 6 touchdown passes. By the way, when we talk about going to a second read, we talk about that's something that's, a hard transition from college to the NFL. A lot of college offenses is first read offenses. NFL, hey, you head's got to be on a swivel, right? Peyton Manning was one of the best at that. Justin Fields was the best quarterback in college football going to a second read. So that's kind of what I'm saying here is that if we're talking about NFL ready, this guy's NFL ready. And so one of two things is true with this report, that the 49ers are down to Mac Jones or Trey Lance. Number one is that they really are sold on one or the other, and they're just divided. They're going to have to make a decision in the next 72 hours before they're on the clock on Thursday. Or it's a smokescreen. They're not interested in either, and they're going to take Justin Fields third overall. One of those two things is going to be true. And so I look at it and I say, man, with all the complaints that the 49ers and their organization and their fan base had about Jimmy Garoppolo, are they expecting Mac Jones to come in and just be the next Joe Montana? Hey, I heard one guy, I think it was Jim Mora Jr., former head coach at UCLA. Yeah, Mac Jones is he's Joe Montana. He literally said that. I'm not joking. Ugh. What's with people, man? And something else too. The last draft that we had 5 quarterbacks selected in the first round, 2018. Okay, we had Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, Josh Rosen, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. 3 of those guys have proved to be successful NFL quarterbacks. Baker Mayfield, I've got my criticisms of Baker Mayfield, got to the playoffs. Okay, he can play. He can play. Can he win a Super Bowl? I doubt it, but he can play. Lamar Jackson, yeah, all he did was win an MVP, and he's gotten to the playoffs, not 1, not 2, but 3 straight years. First 3 years of his career, he's gotten to the playoffs. And Josh Allen, who year by year has gotten not just better, but like leaps and bounds better than the previous year, and last year was in the MVP discussion. So those 3 quarterbacks absolutely worked. Sam Darnold, we're going to find out this year if the Jets were the problem or not. I believe yes. I believe the Jets were the issue. The Jets mess up every quarterback, and I'll get more into in depth with this on Thursday. But the Jets have a history with Sam Darnold and Geno Smith and who else? Mark Sanchez and Chad Pennington. They mess up careers with quarterbacks. That's what they do. That's what they do. But what I will say is that there's going to be Josh Rosen. We want to talk about a bust. We had heard for years, Josh Rosen's the next great NFL quarterback. Yeah, he was awful his rookie year. He got replaced immediately by Kyler Murray. Goes to Miami, it doesn't do anything there. And now he's fighting just to be a practice squad quarterback. It's kind of sad, man, that he fell this quickly. I feel terrible for him. But we're going to have a bust in this draft. We're going to have a bust. I believe 3 of these guys are going to work, and 1 will kind of be in between. That's where Trevor Lawrence is going to be a star. He is. Justin Fields, I believe, can be a star. Trey Lance, love the kid. So I think those are the three that are going to work in the NFL. Mac Jones, bust. Then we get to Zach Wilson, and I don't know. Zach Wilson is the one big question mark to me. He's the one big question mark. Because, as I literally just mentioned, the Jets have a thing for messing up college quarterbacks' careers. That's what they do. But he's shown the ability at BYU, like, man, this guy is, he's been called the Mormon Mahomes. I don't know if, I wouldn't compare him to Patrick Mahomes for crying out loud, but some have even compared him to Brett Favre. Okay? Being able to extend plays, being able to, a little bit of gunslinger, which, I'm not a big fan of, just slinging it around the field. It's no risk it, no biscuit, as Bruce Arians, likes to say. So I don't know with Zach Wilson. I got to sit back and see, does this work? So this is what happens every draft. Every time we have a draft where we got all the first round quarterbacks, not all of them work. Not all of them work. Usually 2 or 3 do. If there's five quarterbacks, 2 or 3, like one's a superstar, one could work. One could make multiple Pro Bowls, and then we have a bust, and then one guy who's either a bust or I don't know. That's usually what happens. As Barry Grant Jr. is back in the chat, he says Zach Wilson is the Jim McMahon of this draft. That's a good comparison. Jim McMahon did win a Super Bowl with Chicago Bears, but albeit he had the greatest defense ever behind him. Mike Ditka, great NFL coach, head coach. So I don't think the Jets are going to be smelling a Super Bowl anytime soon. Sorry, Jets fans. But let me go now to the Dallas Cowboys. Now, Dallas is obviously, they've got the 10th overall pick, which I talked about last year at the end of the year. Like, what are they doing winning these games at the end of the year? They lost to Baltimore on what was supposed to be a Thursday night game, but because of COVID, Ravens had COVID problems, it got postponed to a Tuesday night game. Dallas loses to Baltimore, drops to 3-9. They still had an outside shot at the division with 4 games to play, but I'm like, man, come on. Like, why even try to make the playoffs? You're going to get bounced by Tampa Bay in the first round. What's that going to do? It's just going to kill your draft position. Dallas had an opportunity to have a top 5 or 6 pick. You know what I'm saying? Like, but they beat Cincinnati on the road, and then they beat San Francisco at home, and then they beat Philly at home, and with a shot to put themselves in the position to actually win the division, they stunk it up against the New York Giants in the final game of the season, and that was that. Now, of course, Dak's back. Got my Dak hat on. Dak's back. Dallas will be a playoff team next year. There's no question about it. But I've heard a lot of debate. What do the Cowboys do with the 10th overall pick? So I see the comment. I'm going to put the comment up there in just a second. When it comes to, I've heard all this, the media, it just loves this narrative right now. Kyle Pitts to the Cowboys, and nobody loves this narrative than Jared Jones. Jared Jones, he loves that narrative. He loves that narrative. He wants Dak Prescott to have Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb and Kyle Pitts and Michael Gallup and Cedric Wilson's a guy I like, and Zeke in the backfield and Tony Pollard and not a single star defensive player. You've got, and listen, I talked about if Dallas wanted to take Kyle Pitts, I'd have mixed emotions about it because you know me, I think Kyle Pitts is going to be a superstar in the NFL. He's a phenomenal athlete. He's got all the measurables. He's not a great blocker, but hey, Travis Kelce isn't a good blocker either, and he's the best tight end in the league. You don't have to be a great blocker. Heck, that's what the offensive line's for at the end of the day. You can have blocking tight ends. But I think Kyle Pitts is going to be a superstar in the league. I really do. But Dallas doesn't need him. They don't. They need defense. They had 3 games last year. It was 2, but it was almost 3 where they gave up 300 rushing yards. That's a problem. Some of that's just a mindset problem, but part of that is just a personnel problem. Now, of course, they got rid of Mike Nolan, which they should have done like a month in, who is just with Dallas. They hire a guy in Dan Quinn, who, of course, the last time he was a defensive coordinator, it was with Seattle. It was the Legion of Boom, Richard Sherman, Cam Chancellor, Earl Thomas. But the question is, was it the Legion of Boom or was it Dan Quinn? I'm going to go with the former on that one. He had some Hall of Fame players in that defense. But it's certainly an upgrade over what they had. My thing is this. If, I'll just go and put the comment here. He said, do you think it's smart to trade up? We have pitched dreams. If you're going to trade up, here's what you got to do. Here's what you got to do. You got the 10th pick. Atlanta, I think Atlanta's going to take Pitts. So if Dallas is going to trade up to 4, Atlanta's going to know, okay, yeah, they're trading up to go get Kyle Pitts. Because Surtain's going to be available. J.C. Horn's going to be available. Micah Parsons could be available. Like, there's that, working against the Cowboys. If Dallas trades up, I don't know who it'd be with, whether it be, Cincinnati possibly or Atlanta. They trade up. Here's what they need to do. Trade Gallup. Remember, Michael Gallup, he was a 3rd-round pick in 2018. This is his 4th year. They've got no 5th-year option, so next year he's going to be a free agent, and he's going to want to get paid as every athlete should want to get paid. Dallas does not have the money to pay Michael Gallup, and that's fine. They got Amari Cooper. They got CeeDee Lamb. Okay, they're good there. They've got Blake Jarwin at tight end. They're fine at their wide receiver position if Michael Gallup leaves or is traded. If you're going to trade for Pitts, Michael Gallup, Blake Jarwin, who's also in a contract year, package them together and trade up to get Kyle Pitts. Now, you would also like to get, maybe a 3rd-round pick in the process. I don't know if you'd be able to pull that off, but that's what I'm saying. So you want picks and you want Pitts. Another comment here. Don't kill my dreams, Bryson. I'm not trying to kill your dreams. I actually just gave you a direct route to get Kyle Pitts. Here's what I think they should do. Again, like people forget, Dak's numbers were ridiculous the first 4 games of the season. Of course, they weren't ridiculous in the 5th game because he got hurt. Dak's numbers were just insane. You could say, well, it was in garbage time. Well, Rams was a close game at the end. Of course, they had the miracle to beat Atlanta. When Dak left the field against the Seattle Seahawks, they had the lead with 2 minutes to go, and the defense did what they normally did last season. He almost led one of the best regular season comebacks ever against the Cleveland Browns, and of course the defense gave up the reverse to Odell Beckham Jr., and that was good night. So Dallas's offense is fine. Like they're more than fine. My biggest question with the Cowboys offense is Zeke. It is not the receiving corps. The receiving corps is top 3 in the NFL. It's up there with, obviously, you got Tampa Bay, you got Kansas City, you got Minnesota. Like, there's some great receiving corps. Dallas is among them. They've got talent everywhere. But when I look at it and I say, why would you add a guy who, while I believe he's going to be special, I do. But just today, Sean Lee retired. Okay, Sean Lee retired from the NFL. Great career, 11 seasons. It sucks that he had all the injuries. He had the ACL and the hamstrings. He had multiple hamstring issues, concussions. I mean, he was being, in the prime of his career, around like 2015, 2016, he was being compared to Luke Kuechly. And Luke Kuechly is going to be a Hall of Famer. Of course, Luke retired at the age of 29 a year ago because of nagging injuries. And so you've got a hole there. Jalen Smith was suspect last year. Leighton Vander Esch can't stay healthy. Okay? So either you go get Micah Parsons, who I'm hearing is being compared to Devin White, who's a superstar, one of the 2 or 3 best linebackers in the NFL with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Micah Parsons did not play last season for Penn State because he opted out due to COVID. So in 2019, he was a superstar. He was even being talked about as being a possible top 5 pick this year. A year ago. So scouts love him. Then you've got Patrick Surtain out of Alabama, who's got great ball skills. He reminds me a little bit of Richard Sherman. So you could have Pat Surtain with Trayvon Diggs. Got 2 Alabama corners. That is normally a sign of good things in the secondary. Pat Surtain on one side, Trayvon Diggs, who I really, really like. He had a terrible start to the year last year and came on towards the end before he got hurt. So you got 2 Bama corners. You got Jalen Smith. Can he come back and do something? It's got to be either Parsons or Surtain. And worst case scenario, J.C. Horn out of South Carolina. I like J.C. Horn. He's quick. Reminds me a little bit of Tre'Davious White. So just with Dallas, look, I get it. Jerry loves the stars. He loves offense. But did Jerry Jones forget that in the 90s, when it was the big names, it was Aikman, it was Emmitt Smith, it was Michael Irvin. He does realize that they had Charles Haley, 5-time Super Bowl champion, one of the greatest defensive ends of all time. He does realize he had the greatest corner of all time in that last Super Bowl run in Deion Sanders. He does. Darren Woodson, great player with Dallas. Like, he does realize they had superstars, not just stars, they had superstars on that defense. Like, those Cowboys teams in the 90s were just stacked with talent. Jerry messed it all up by firing Jimmy Johnson after that second Super Bowl. They could have possibly been the Patriots dynasty before the Patriots dynasty. But that went up in flames in I think, 1994. And so, defense does win championships, guys. Like, it does. Last year you had, not last year, it was just a couple months ago, month and a half ago, 2.5 months ago. You had the Kansas City Chiefs. No question, best offensive league. No question, best quarterback in the league. You got the fastest players in the league, Tyreek Hill. You had a running game which had been working well up to that point. You have the best tight end in the league in Travis Kelce. You got the best offensive head coach in the NFL in Andy Reid. And they play, and of course, and by the way, Kansas City has really built their offensive lineup. They just traded for Orlando Brown, which makes no sense for Baltimore, and I'll get into Baltimore later on in the show. But they really bolstered up their offensive line. But Kansas City's O-line was hurt, and they were going against a hot defense, a defense full of superstar players. You got Shaq Barrett. You've got, as I just mentioned, Devin White. You got Levante David, who's still a superstar linebacker at this stage in his career. You had guys like Ndamukong Suh, JPP. They had some ballers in this defense, on that defense. And they got completely shut down. So people may not like the term defense wins championships. It still applies in 2021, y'all. It's one of the reasons I don't trust the Brooklyn Nets. I'm out on Brooklyn. I think they're going to make the finals. I really do, if KD stays healthy. But they can't get a stop. Like, you got to get stops. You can't. Dallas can't win every game 50-48. You got to get stops. So that's what I'm saying is, you got two guys, especially Micah Parsons. I love that kid. Watch some of his tape recently. Man, that kid can fly. He is a playmaker, man, on the defensive side of the ball. You've got Micah Parsons, Patrick Surtain, who fill a need. I sounded like Stephen A. Smith there with weed. You got to take one of those two. Excuse me. You got to take one of those two guys. You have to. You need a corner. You need a linebacker. You don't need a tight end. You don't. Kyle Pitts going to be great. I think Kyle Pitts is going to be a multi-time Pro Bowler at the tight end position in the NFL. I think soon he'll be mentioned with Travis Kelce and George Kittle as the best in the NFL. Not right away, but eventually. I think he's got superstar potential, Hall of Fame potential, if I may say so. But Dallas doesn't need him. They don't. So when you look at it, why would I trade up for a guy that's icing on the cake for one side, but for the other side, it's like we can't, can we get some reinforcement over here? Like, just remember, don't be, I don't want to say prisoners of the moment, but don't forget what we were talking about in September, in October, in especially November and December with the Cowboys. Is that, man, especially in September, Dak's throwing for 450, 500 yards, and CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper and Gallup's balling, and that, man, they're just putting up points everywhere. But they could not get a stop to save their lives. The Cleveland Browns ran it down their throats in week 4. Russell Wilson torched them in week 3. Matt Ryan torched them in week 2, in which they barely won. They shouldn't have won with the onside kick. Okay. The Ravens ran all over them. Okay. You had, what was the other game? Arizona embarrassed them. So that's what I'm getting to. And Washington, by the way, just demolished them. And Washington did not have a great offense last year. And so that's the point is, you got to fill position of need. You're not in the position like Tampa Bay, for example, who is good everywhere. They're good everywhere. They brought back everybody from last year. They're just drafting for, okay, who's the best player on the board? Whoever the best player on the board, we're going to take. Heck, I've even heard them talking about possibly taking a quarterback. Okay, like if he's the best player on the board, I've heard, the guy out of Stanford I like. I can't remember his name, but I think he could, possibly do some things in the league. If he's available, he's the best player available. Tampa Bay's going to take him because they're good everywhere. They're good everywhere. Defense stacked, offense stacked, good on special teams even. Like, they're fine. Dallas is not in that position. Dallas's defense cannot hold a candle to Tampa Bay. Dallas's offense can. Their defense cannot. Okay, you got to add reinforcements to that side of the football. That's all there is to it. So I get Cowboys fans, the media, and especially Jerry Jones want Kyle Pitts. I get it. You're going to sell more Kyle Pitts jerseys than you would Surtain jerseys or Parsons jerseys. But what gives you a better shot to be competitive in these big games against? Because keep in mind, next year, they play both teams that made it to the Super Bowl, Tampa Bay and Kansas City. They play the Chargers, who have a great offense. Okay. The Raiders are a great running team. We saw what other teams like Cleveland and Baltimore did to Dallas. Great running teams, pounding it down their throat. You got to have reinforcements in the building in Dallas on the defensive side of the ball. You don't need Kyle Pitts. I promise. So let's get to the Atlanta Falcons, who, of course, have the number 4 overall pick. And reports came out today that it won't be for another month and a half, or a little less than that, about a month. It's April 26th. We're almost into May. That the Atlanta Falcons, once we get to June 1st, due to cap reasons, contract reasons, are possibly going to trade Julio Jones. Now, first of all, this all but ensures they are in a rebuild, which at that point, it's like, okay, what do you do with Matt Ryan? Because Matt Ryan, at the age he is, I doubt he wants to be in a rebuild. And he can still play. Matt Ryan can still ball. He just didn't have the defense behind him. Time and time again, the Falcons, just as they have constantly in the past, they just found what new ways to lose each and every week against Dallas and Chicago and Kansas City late in the year. They just found new ways to lose every week. Okay, so some of that was bad luck. Some of that was just being terrible situationally. Some of it was bad defense. But not a lot of it had to do with Matt Ryan. So the question is what they do with him. But I've got a perfect trade destination for Julio Jones. Okay, how about the Baltimore Ravens? What has been the number one complaint about Baltimore offensively? It's not been Lamar Jackson. Man's won an MVP. He's been great in the big games. Running game's been outstanding. Okay. Offensive line is stacked, although it's not as stacked today as it was last week for some reason unknown to me and unknown to a lot of people. They traded Orlando Brown to the Kansas City Chiefs. And so now you look at Baltimore, and what have we said the last few years? Man, if Lamar Jackson had a star receiver, to be able to rely on, to throw to in these key moments, man, this Ravens offense would be scary. And it would be. How about Julio Jones? I think at this stage in his career, I don't think he's the best receiver in the league. But he has the potential to still be a top 10 receiver. Make no mistake about it. With those physical abilities, with that size, with that speed, that catch radius, that ability to still separate. That'll work. Especially when you're going against, two great secondaries in the Cleveland Browns and in the Pittsburgh Steelers. Like, you're going to need a star receiver to rely on, especially once Baltimore, and they'll be a playoff team, no question about it. The AFC North, obviously Cincinnati, they're not competing for the division. I'm out on Pittsburgh at this point because they kept Big Ben. It's down to Cleveland or Baltimore to win the AFC North. My gut tells me today probably Cleveland, but I'm certainly not counting Baltimore out of it. Point is, once the Ravens get to the playoffs next year and they get in these big games, they need these playoff games, really, I should say. They got to have that number one guy who Lamar Jackson can trust in key moments, those big third downs. Okay, in the red zone. Ravens have not been good in the red zone in playoff games. Like, they need that guy, that number one guy to go to. And by the way, when you get a number one receiver, and the Ravens receiving core isn't trash. They just added Sammy Watkins. Okay, they've got, Marquise Brown. They've got some players in the receiving core. They got Mark Andrews, good tight end. When you get a guy like Julio Jones, it opens it up for everybody else. So if I'm Baltimore today, and I think they're a phenomenally ran organization from top to bottom, they need to go get a deal done. They need to go make a deal for Julio Jones. They need to be aggressive. Now, of course, the Falcons are not going to deal Julio Jones until June 1st because I think it'd be like a $23 million cap hit if they traded him now and only like a $15 million cap hit if they traded him on June 1st or afterwards. So I think he'd be a perfect fit in Baltimore. I really do. When you've got an ascending quarterback like Lamar Jackson, a guy who's going to want his money soon, who could get his money in the offseason or next offseason, you want to validate signing him to a long-term deal because he's going to be in Baltimore long-term. He is. I know a great NFL scout who I have a lot of respect for, but I totally disagree with him on this one. Bucky Brooks said, they should just cut bait with Lamar and draft Justin Fields. Like Justin Fields, not as much as Lamar Jackson. Not as much as Lamar Jackson. So I think that'd be a horrible idea for the Ravens to do because they'd have to change their entire offense up from what everybody in that team was used to. So Lamar's going to stay. But you want to get him that number one receiver who he can go to in the big spots. Okay. And Julio Jones can still play. Julio Jones still has top 10 receiver ability. Problem has been injuries. We haven't seen the Falcons as much because they haven't been winning. Remember back in 2016 when they were, rise up. And of course, before the infamous 28-3 choke against the Patriots in Super Bowl 52 or 51, I should say. When the Falcons were in these big primetime games, it's like, good night. You see this guy? Man, he's special. He's been special from day one since 2011, since he came into the NFL. And he's going into his 11th season. He could still be great. He's going to be a future Hall of Famer. He could still be great. So I think Baltimore would be the perfect marriage, especially because I know I keep bringing it up. Why did they trade Orlando Brown? Great offensive lineman. And especially you trade him to, of all places, Kansas City, who needed an offensive lineman badly after the Super Bowl. That one didn't make any sense to me at all, but, what do I know? But I think Julio to Baltimore would be a match made in football heaven. And I think it would give the Ravens a legitimate shot to forget, just not just winning the division, but hey, maybe they can compete with Kansas City now. What's been the Ravens' biggest issue in the AFC? Kansas City. It's the one team that Lamar Jackson has played at least once in his career and has never beaten. So, or more than once. I think they played him three times, and Lamar Jackson and the Ravens are 0-3 against Pat Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. So, just something to think about. Julio, in Baltimore, with a good receiving corps. It's an above average receiving corps. Again, Marquise Brown, Sammy Watkins, if he can stay healthy, Mark Andrews, great running game, obviously. But then you add Julio, it opens it up for everybody. That's what number one receivers can do. It can make everybody else, give them everybody else the opportunity to shine. So that's all significant. So final topic of the day, LeBron James. Now, the Lakers have lost 3 straight games. Anthony Davis has played in the last 2. He came back on Thursday night against the Dallas Mavericks. Only played 15 minutes, scored 4 points. And then Saturday night against Dallas again. They've been, because the condensed season, the NBA has had more of these back-to-backs on the road or at home just to limit the amount of travel, which, I totally understand. But Lakers have lost 3 straight. They got crushed by Utah last week. They got, they got had by Dallas in both games. Dallas was actually down 17 points on Saturday night and came back and won the game by double digits. I think it was by double digits. Luka was outstanding as he normally is, and that was it for the Lakers over the weekend. Now they play the Magic tonight. I would hope they could beat the Magic. Orlando, I think, is the worst offensive team in the league, so Lakers shouldn't have any problem with them even without LeBron. But what we're starting to see is what I've said on the show for a while, is that this team, despite the talent, this is a talented team. They are too darn LeBron James reliant. It's LeBron James or bust. And it's not like it's a different, of course, if you got LeBron and you got even a second good player, you're in the championship contention because he's that great. I mean, he took a poor Cleveland team in 2018 to the finals. and had one of the greatest playoff runs we've ever seen. But it's not like it's the difference. Even you would think, even with a player like Anthony Davis, a top 10 player in the league, when healthy, without a doubt, you would think with LeBron and Anthony Davis, you just added Andre Drummond. You got a pretty good bench. You got Montrezl Harrell, who's the reigning sixth man of the year. You would think, even without LeBron, the Lakers wouldn't be championship contenders, of course, but they'd still be a good team, a playoff team, 6th seed, 7th seed. Folks, y'all realize they're a game and a half out of having to play in the play-in tournament? Just saying, they're a game and a half ahead of Portland on this with the 6th seed for having to play in the in this upcoming play-in tournament. So that's what I think is just, it's crazy. Excuse me, they're the 5th seed. They're the 5th. I apologize. They're the 5th seed. They're 3 games up on Portland, but still. The Lakers in a position, like, they better start winning games. Because if they don't, now they'll be in a position where it's not, you make the playoffs, you're in the first round, and it's best of 7. No. Because of this new play-in tournament, it's best of 2. It's best of 2, because I'd assume they'd be the 7 or 8 seed, probably the 7 seed, if they were to fall into the play-in tournament. If you lose back-to-back games, you're done. Season's over. So while I think the Lakers, if LeBron's able to come back healthy, which, I saw a video today on Instagram of him, running, so that's good. It's more like jogging, but hey, it's progress, especially considering the ankle injury he did suffer a month ago. That is huge. That if he's able to come back, I think the Lakers are the favorites. While KD, I believe, is the best player on earth, okay, I do. You don't know what you're getting out of Kyrie. You dang sure don't know what you're getting in the playoffs out of James Harden. And we haven't seen the rest of that roster in big playoff moments. And by the way, they can't play an ounce of defense. Not an ounce of defense. So that's all I'm saying. And it's gotten to the point where the Lakers are not just like even a good team without LeBron. They wouldn't be a playoff team without LeBron. They would not be a playoff team without LeBron. That's with Anthony Davis, a top 10 player. And it goes to what I've said for a while about Anthony Davis, is that he's obviously great. He'll probably be in the Hall of Fame one day. But if he's the best player on your team, you're not winning the championship. He doesn't have winning intangibles as the best player. Right? He's not a leader. That's LeBron's job. Obviously, LeBron's the best player on the team. He's also the leader of the team. Okay? Jimmy Butler, ability-wise, is not even in the same universe as Anthony Davis. And that's no disrespect to Jimmy Butler, who's obviously talented. But Jimmy Butler's got winning intangibles. We got the Heat team to the finals last year. Right? Anthony Davis could not have taken that Lakers team without LeBron to the finals. He wouldn't have. They wouldn't have beaten Denver. Heck, I don't even know if they'd beaten Houston in the second round. So that's all I'm saying. Like, it's a talented team, but man, they're too LeBron James reliant. And we've seen that on many occasions with LeBron. Obviously, the first stint in Cleveland, it was LeBron and everybody else. I mean, that was not a great Cleveland roster. That was at all. Like they didn't have anywhere near a star. Forget a superstar. They didn't have a star to pair it with LeBron. So he's like, okay, I can't take this anymore. I'm tired of going out in the second round every year because I don't have adequate help. Let me go to Miami. And that big three of LeBron, Wade, and Bosh was great for 3 years. And then that 4th year, once we got to the playoffs, LeBron kind of carried them to the finals. D. Wade had injury issues. Chris Bosh wasn't great. So LeBron had to kind of carry them to the finals that year. The last year in Cleveland, after Kyrie got traded, it was LeBron, a lesser version of Kevin Love, and a bunch of guys. Just as was it Bill Parcells that coined the term JAG, just another guy. That was what the Cleveland Cavaliers were. Just a bunch of guys. J.R. Smith and Tristan Thompson and great shooter Kyle Korver, but I mean, come on. He was in his late 30s. Who else? He had Rodney Hood. I mean, that was not Larry Nance. That was not a great Cleveland team whatsoever, and LeBron somehow carried them to the finals. So, and then now this year, even with AD, they ain't a championship contender if they don't have LeBron James. They're not even a playoff team. If they win a full season without LeBron, they're not a playoff team. They've got legit concerns about having to play in the play-in tournament. So that's something you got to discuss when it comes to the Los Angeles Lakers. Is that despite the talent, despite the depth, despite the fact that I think Frank Vogel's a dang good coach, he's proven that once he's had players. But they can't compete in the playoff series without LeBron James. So that's, and by the way, I think the Clippers are a better team than the Lakers. I really do. But I thought that last year, and I'm like, yeah, after what I saw last year against Denver, the Clippers will find a way to screw it up. That's what they do. They'll find a way to screw it up. So, I have a saying. It's not if the Clippers will lose, it's how they'll choke. That the question isn't whether they'll lose, it's how they'll choke. Because that's what they do. The last 2 times I've been in the conference semifinals, they blew a 3-1 lead. Against Houston in 2015 when it was Lob City, and then last year with Kawhi, PG, and a great roster, Doc Rivers, they choked a 3-1 lead to Denver. So they'll find a way to screw it up. But if LeBron James is not healthy, I am legit worried about the Lakers. Because Andre Drummond's been up and down since he got there. Maybe he can step it up in the playoffs. Montrezl Harrell's been up and down. AD, once he gets fully healthy, he'll be great, but he can't be the best player on a championship team. This team's gotten too LeBron James reliant, and it's starting to show itself. So with that is all the time we have left on today's show. Thank y'all so much for listening on the podcast or watching live on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Cannot wait for Thursday's show because it is the NFL Draft of 2021 in Cleveland, Ohio. It is going to be fun. Just all kinds of topics. It's going to be a great show, and obviously, Friday's show will react to the first round of the draft and what we saw, what we did see, and the whole bit. So it's going to be excellent. I can't wait. So hope everybody has a great evening, great week. Please continue to stay safe. God bless you all, and peace out.